Guardian newspaper. Glenn, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Let me start by showing your tweet where you said that the fact that a person flies to city X does not mean that it is their intended ultimate destination. Tell me the latest, and what do you mean by that as well?
The typical response of the U.S. government and of various supporters in the media whenever somebody comes forward and shines light on what the U.S. government is doing is to try and demonize them. So Americans focus on the messenger and not what it is that's being revealed. And so part of that tactic this morning is to try and claim that he's no longer a Chinese spy or a defector to China, but instead is now defecting to Russia or to Cuba. And it was simply a warning to media outlets not to draw conclusions about what his ultimate intended final destination is simply because he's flying through Moscow and then eventually, according to reports, onto Havana, that doesn't necessarily mean that either Russia or Cuba are the countries he intends to go to.
Yeah, but everybody's speculating where he could be headed to. Could it be Caracas? Could it be Cuba? Could it be, where do you think he's headed to? You're in close contact with him, aren't you?
I have been, but I think rather than sit around playing the game of speculation as though he's, driving a white Bronco and we're all chasing him, I think there's a much more serious question which we ought to be asking, especially as journalists, which is, why is an American citizen who has served his government and his country for the last decade, why does he feel compelled to flee when he comes forward and informs the American public about what the U.S. government is doing in the dark, exposing unconstitutional spying on the American people, deceitful statements from high U.S. government officials? And the answer lies in a McClatchy article today that I hope everybody goes and Googles and reads that describes how the Obama administration is waging an unprecedented war on whistleblowers and leakers inside the government, equating them with enemies of the United States, and has prosecuted them more aggressively than any prior president in history. And I think that's what we ought to be asking is why have whistleblowers been treated so perniciously, such persecution, and why does he feel a need to flee the United States?
Glenn, let me ask you this. We see Edward Snowden referred to as a whistleblower in some reports, a leaker in another. What's the difference?
Well, I think a whistleblower is somebody who exposes things that ought to be exposed in terms of what the most powerful political officials in the country are doing, either wrongdoing on their part, illegality, or deceit. And if you read the New York Times this morning, which summarizes what it is that we've learned from our reports in the Guardian thus far, what you'll see is that he has exposed the fact that James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, lied to Congress when he denied that the NSA is spying on millions of people in bulk. That's what he told the Senate. That turned out to be a lie. As we reported, they're collecting the phone records of millions of Americans all the time. And it also reported that their spying is probably illegal. It exceeds even the boundaries of the Patriot Act as understood by its prime sponsor. And the FISA court in 2011 ruled that much of this spying is unconstitutional and illegal, although that opinion remains secret. And so I think it's classic whistleblowing to come forward and say there are things that your government is doing to you that they're lying about and are keeping from you that you ought to know in a democracy.
Glenn, you don't think that these leaks are putting U.S. national security at risk?
No, that's ridiculous. Every single time the U.S. government has light shined on what it is they're doing, that's the claim that they make. That's what they've been doing going all the way back to when Daniel Ellsberg leaked the Pentagon Papers and showed that the U.S. government was lying to the American public about the Vietnam War. They said, you're endangering national security. Go and look at what our reports have been in The Guardian. There is nothing in them that revealed anything to the terrorists or the Russian and Chinese governments that they didn't already know. Everyone knows that the U.S. government is trying to spy on the conversation of terrorists. What we revealed is that there are things that the American people didn't know, namely that the spying apparatus is directed at them. And the only thing that's been damaged is not U.S. national security, but the credibility and reputation of American political officials.
When was the last time you spoke with Edward Snowden, and how scared is he?
I think I spoke with him about 24 to 36 hours ago. And what's remarkable to me, and has been remarkable to me the whole time, is that although he's very rational and understands exactly the consequences that he has prompted for himself, he has never evinced any sort of regret or remorse or even fear. He's not scared at all. He feels he absolutely did the right thing in shining the light on the government and informing his fellow citizens, and he's more than prepared to accept whatever consequences come from that.
All right, so in that conversation that you had with him, what did he tell you is his next step?
Well, he is my source. He's continuing to work with me on the stories that we've been writing. And so I'm not going to divulge the conversations that I've had with him about his plans or his intentions, but, he's been clear from the start that his goal is to remain part of this debate, to be able to defend himself, to participate in the ongoing debate about surveillance policies. And he knows that if he ends up in the clutches of the U.S. government, they're going to put him in a cage and silence him and prevent him from being heard, like they've done to Bradley Manning and to other whistleblowers. So he definitely intends to remain free for as long as he can, as any person in his position would.
One last question for you. How is Edward Snowden paying for all this? Where's he getting the money to move about, to remain free?
No, he has been working at some fairly lucrative jobs for the last 3 years. He worked for Booz Allen Hamilton. Prior to that, he worked for Dell. He was making, at his stay with Dell, $150,000 to $200,000 a year, with bonuses up to $200,000. So as far as I know, he's been financing it himself, both with his own money and on his credit cards. I don't know how he's financing it now. I haven't asked him, but it's very possible he has financed it himself. He's far from impoverished.
But he's traveling with WikiLeaks legal advisors at this moment, so I'm sure that's not free. Or maybe is WikiLeaks funding him?
He is not impoverished. He's been very gainfully employed over the last several years, and purchasing a plane ticket is hardly beyond the ability of somebody who has earned the salaries that he's earned.
Okay, Glenn Greenwald, thanks so much for your time this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.